May I have everyone's attention, please? May I have your attention? We'd like to go ahead and get started with this evening's program. So would everyone please take their seats? First of all, I'd like to say good evening to all of my fellow alumnus of Ball State University. It is with great pride and great pleasure as a member of the Board of Directors of the Black Alumni Constituent Society. It wasn't that bad. And also as the President of the Ball State University Alumni Association, that I am afforded the opportunity to extend to you a welcome to the 1998 reunion, taking it to the House. This year's reunion marks the last reunion before the end of this century. That in itself is significant, for that it provides for all of us an opportunity to retroactively look at where we have come from, analytically assess where we are, and proactively plan where we need to be. As we move forward, our individual and collective experiences should not be forgotten. Though they have been varied, though they have been difficult, and they have presented many challenges to all of us, they have greatly influenced who we are and have been a determining factor in the successes that we have achieved and attained. That is important to remember and is an important cornerstone to build upon. Black alumni at Ball State University have over the years been extremely successful in numerous occupations and professional endeavors. And to that end, we must communicate and we must share with the university, with the student body, and with fellow alumni those skills, those talents, those attitudes, and those intangibles that have helped us maintain our focus and continue to strive forward. We must, as Black alumni, be a part of the equation and the solution. We, as those who have gone on, have a responsibility and must be committed. Black alumni, the Black Alumni Constituent Society is a viable organization. It is a visible organization. It has strength. It has meaning. And it's important that we recognize and project that. To use the vernacular on the street, if we don't recognize, then we won't be recognized. The themes of our previous reunions, to a large extent, speak to what we must be about. If you can recall some of those themes, they are sharing the vision, investment equals dividends, black diamonds at Ball State University. If we can actualize the meaning and the connotations of these themes, then we would truly be taking it to the House. Again, without further ado, I would like to extend a welcome to the reunion, a welcome to your Alumni Center, a welcome back to your university. I hope and trust that everyone has had a good time to this point and will continue on tonight and tomorrow. And again, welcome to Ball State once again. Thank you. At this time, I'd like for Sandra Parker to come forward. Sandra will do the candle lighting in remembrance of Ball State alumni who have passed on before us. You may need to relight.
Are honored to have some very special guests in the house, our beautiful home, away from home. And when I call your name, would you please stand? We have Mrs. Penny Thomas and her lovely daughter, Susan Thomas. And Penny Thomas is on the Ball State Board of Trustees. Dr. and Mrs. Donald Park, who is Vice President of the University Advancement here at Ball State. Dr. David Davis, Director of Early Outreach. And last but not least, Edwin Shipley, the Executive Director of the Ball State Alumni Association. Welcome. We're so happy to have you here.
Let's see. Thank you, very good. Now get ready for Ball State alumni.
Good evening. Would everyone mind taking their seats for a moment, please? everyone mind taking their seats? In 1962, I came to Ball State, and one of the first persons that I met was Homer Jackson, and I didn't have a place to stay at the time. All on-campus housing was taken, and I had not found a place off campus. So as I said in orientation program with Homer, he convinced me that this place where he was staying was the best place off campus. So as I started there and lived and went out, and I met the owner of the place, Mrs. Dollison, and also I met two other roommates. One was Kenneth Bronson from Richmond, Indiana, and the other was David Miller. David and Kenneth were seniors. Homer and I were freshmen. So they set out on the journey of teaching us how to succeed at Ball State University. Fortunately or unfortunately, David and I were only together for one quarter at that time. David graduated in 1963. Following graduation, he went to the Army. He stayed there 2 years. Following that, he moved to Fort Wayne. He remained in Fort Wayne until 1970, when he began his law school career at University of Michigan. In 1971, he married LaVon Cunningham, his current wife, and only wife. In 1973, David graduated and returned to Fort Wayne, where he worked as the deputy city attorney for the city of Fort Wayne and Allen County, maybe it's better to say. Between 1973 and 1979, David also worked in a firm in which he ultimately became a partner of. The firm was, I don't know the name of it. What's the name of the firm, David?
Levenoff, Weavy and Snow.
And ultimately became Levenoff
Weavy, Snow, Miller,
and Gray. But more importantly, David, during the time that he's been an attorney, he joined in 1979, he joined the U.S. Attorney's Office as a prosecutor. He was the first African American to become a prosecutor for the Northern District of Indiana. During the time that he served there, he has risen to the position of supervisor of that particular office. For 15 years, he prosecuted primarily drug trafficking cases. More recently, he has become and prosecuted white-collar crimes, including mail fraud and things of that nature. Probably the most memorable part of David's career as an attorney is the fact that he has proven himself as a fair and able person. In 1996, I talked to David, and he was very, very proud of a recent achievement which he had recently received, which is called the Fellows of American College Trial. Let me see. The Fellows in American Colleges of Trial Lawyers. It's probably one of the most prestigious awards, fellowships that can be given to an attorney who practices law for the federal government. And it's something what David referred to as a good old boys club. In other words, you have to do very, very well for a long, long time and prove yourself as a lawyer. David and LaVon are the proud parents of two children, Leslie Their daughter attended IU University, graduated in 1994, and went on to get a JD in 1997. She's currently a prosecutor with the Allen County Allen County Attorney's Office there in Fort Wayne, and she's doing primarily prosecutorial work. They have a son who is Chris. Chris graduated from Indiana University in 1995. He's scheduled to begin MBA program at the University of Arizona State in August of this year. In talking to David initially, I asked him to come and speak to us. Many of the people want him to come, and many of us remember him in his capacity as a student here at Ball State, who was always on the cutting edge, who was advocating change. So when I called him to come, it was in May of 1997. And I asked him if he could speak to us in July. And David, who had always expressed some reluctance of returning to Ball State in that capacity, said, well, I have to look at my calendar. So he reviewed his calendar. He said, well, July, I think I'm busy in July. I said, well, what days are you busy? He said, well, I'm busy all of July. I said, well, David, we're really talking about July of 1998. So at that, he said, well, he was overcome, and he did agree to speak to us. And he's asked me this evening, what should he speak about? And I told him to give a closing argument, and I think it would suffice. So without my staying up here any longer and not doing a very good job introducing him, I will at this time introduce David Miller, a Ball State graduate of 1963.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, fellow alumni. I'm certainly proud and humble and blessed to be here. Ben is correct. I talked to him, I talked to Brother Ed Butler about coming back to Ball State and participating. Not in this setting, not about the Black Alumni Association, but about Ball State. I had, and still have, mixed emotions about Ball State that grew from the time that I was here in 1959 to 1963, which is a long time ago. And during that period of time, the university was, in my opinion, segregated, particularly the housing. We had to live approximately 5 to 7 miles away. Ben lived there for a while. Homer Jackson lived there. Kenneth Bronson lived there. A lot of guys lived there at 1001 Kirby, and the other house where people lived was on Pershing Drive, and that was the only place other than on campus that you could live. And they had an approved housing list, and myself and Ron Webb and other people, Andre Bohannon, were very much concerned about this, and we met with the school administration. I think we even met with President Emmons about this situation. And I thought that it was a very simple thing to do. If you wanted to be on the approved off-campus housing list, then you should accept any student at Ball State, regardless of color. And if you didn't want to do that, then you wouldn't be on the approved off-campus housing list. And we went through meetings and conferences and meetings with fraternities and sororities. And it was a very frustrating situation. And I never forgot that situation. And That is why I had mixed emotions about coming back to Ball State. I shared these mixed emotions with Ben and with Ed Butler. And Ben told me something that gave me pause. He said, David, let go of the past and look to the future. And remember that you're not the same person that was here in 1963. And Ball State is not the same as it was in 1963. And that you should look to the future and look to the future of Ball State. And the fact that you're a lawyer today had its beginnings with your education here at Ball State, and we would like for you to come back and speak. And so I am here, and I'm very pleased and proud to be here. The campus has grown tremendously, and I hope that I have grown as much as the university has grown. I would like to speak briefly about survival of values and tradition. Some years ago, Ed Butler shared with me this information. And I don't know the name of the author, and I have made a few additions, but it's entitled For Those Born Before 1945. And there are some of us who were born before 1945 that are in this room today. And I won't point them out, but I'm one of them. It says, we are survivors. Consider the changes we have witnessed. We were born before television, before penicillin, before polio shots, before frozen food, Xerox, plastic, contact lenses, and the pill. We were born before pantyhose, dishwashers, clothes dryers, electric blankets, and air conditioners. We never heard of FM audio tape decks, electronic typewriters, artificial hearts, word processors, computers, and guys wearing earrings. A chip meant a small piece of wood. Hardware meant hardware. And cyberspace, telecommuting, the internet, and software weren't even words. Yahoo was your country cousin. We did, however, come of age in the 60s. And we survived the excesses of the 60s to become responsible, productive, middle-aged men and women. And many of us internalized the idealism of the 60s, including myself. I talked to a number of people here that I haven't seen in a long time, and they reminded me of what an angry young man I was at the time. And I was angry. And I thought myself somewhat of a rebel. However, my kids tell me now that I'm an ultra-conservative, which just drives me crazy. Can't be. But I internalized that idealism of the 60s, and many of my basic ideas and beliefs were formulated and tested here at Ball State between 1959 and 1963. And some of them, as I told you about, were encounters with the university. Some of them were encounters with the surrounding community, which I also felt that Ball State should take a bigger lead in. I remember one bar that was on the outskirts of the university at that time. It was called the Bird, the Flamingo Bar. And after every game, football, basketball game, people went to the Bird. Black students couldn't go to the Bird. I don't care if you're a basketball player or a football player. You couldn't go to the Bird. And I remember one evening, Ron Webb, who was black, and David Johnson, who was white, a student here, and David Rogers, a student here, so 2 blacks, 2 whites, went to the Bird. And we all sat down at the bar, and when we sat down at the bar, the bartender came, he put a napkin in front of the 2 white guys, and he gave us nothing. And I said to him, do you know that there is a law in Indiana that prohibits you from discriminating. And the man said to me, I don't care. I'll pay the fine over and over again, but you're not drinking in here. And he was not joking. And during that period of time, you know, if you stayed, then it was disorderly conduct. And some of you may remember a police officer named Stonebreaker. Stonebreaker would come and take care of the brothers that created a problem. So we were left, went down to the police station and complained to no avail. The same thing happened in regard to the Pizza King that was at the end of Kirby Avenue, right at Kirby and Madison. And Snake, or David Rogers, we called him Snake, people thought he was black because he lived there in 1001 with us, and they thought about how the races were blending so that you couldn't even tell that he was black. And he was white. He was a white guy from Boston was where he was from. But he worked at the Pizza King. And in those days, you could order a pizza and you could carry out the pizza. But you couldn't go in there and eat the pizza. And this is probably 62, 63. And so what we did, we went in, Snake and Johnson went in, ordered 2 large pizzas, told them that there were 4 people coming. Ron Webb and I then came later. They had the oven in the center, they had the family room to the left, and they had the bar to the right. The manager of the Pizza King, when Ron Webb and I came in and sat down, he didn't want to lose the sale of those 2 large pizzas. So what he did was he moved everybody out of the family side of the Pizza King, and he put them over into the bar section, including children. And if that wasn't enough of an insult, he then took a chair and propped it up in front of the door so no one could come in. And they left us there to eat our pizza alone with no other people in the Pizza King family section. And I thought, what audacity, sitting right here in the middle of the neighborhood, taking money from African Americans, but not letting you eat there. And when you would call and make a reservation, or go down and make a reservation, they would tell you we're full this week, next week, as far as you're concerned, every week. And those experiences are what caused me to have mixed emotions about coming back just to Ball State and to Muncie in general. But I'm glad to see that things are improving. I've talked to Greg Williams, who's coming back to speak. He's told me about the university having each freshman read his book. I've talked to another friend of mine that was here in Muncie at the time, Ralph Kersey, Ducky Kersey, who spoke out at Ball Hospital. And he says that things are improving. There's still a lot to be done. And I think that part of that lot that has to be done is a healing process that has to begin with me being here, and that's why I'm here today. And I really am humble, and I really do appreciate this opportunity to come here. I talk about that idealism, and that youthful idealism survives today. However, now it's a pragmatic, middle-aged idealism that is fighting the cynicism of 20 years as a prosecutor. I still believe that lawyers are primarily charged with the responsibility of helping people. And I know that in today's society there are lawyer-bashing jokes and that lawyers are one step above used car salesmen. But I don't subscribe to that view. And again, it's probably that idealism born out of the 60s that I truly believe that lawyers are here to help. Unfortunately, the economic situation has caused the pendulum to swing, and lawyers, along with other businesses, look at the bottom line, and consumers look at the bottom line. But you know, and I've been in this situation, when you go into court and you cannot speak, a lawyer speaks for you. I don't care how upset you get. I don't care what anybody else is saying. The judge will not let you speak. That, to me, requires a personal service. You need somebody that you trust, not somebody that will give you the lowest deal and talk to you one time. You need somebody that you form a trusting relationship with, and you need a lawyer that honors that trusting relationship, because you can't get it done with one meeting. People, when they come to a lawyer, are in crisis. They have problems. They need guidance. They need help. And I truly believe that the legal profession, that is their responsibility. You may say, well, you're a prosecutor, and you're a lawyer. How do you help? I think even more so, it's the obligation of a prosecutor to help not only the community, but the defendants that come into the criminal justice system. I had a discussion just at the table with Greg Williams about the Fourth Amendment and turning over evidence and some experiences that he and Ben may have had with other prosecutors across the country. And one of the things that I can say, and one of the reasons why I'm still at the United States Attorney's Office, the Department of Justice, is, and I firmly believe this, it is the last place where your sole responsibility is to do justice. I'm not elected. I don't have to run for office. I don't have to get votes. I don't have to contribute to the bottom line of running the office. My sole responsibility is to do justice. And that is a heavy responsibility, and it's a responsibility that I do not take lightly. And I would hope that my fellow prosecutors, particularly in the federal system, would have the same attitude. And I hope that I am representative of that attitude. I know that among the lawyers that are here, they would say again, that's that youthful idealism. It just isn't that way. But we can always strive to do better, and we can always strive to do better in relationship to the law or the lawyer that you're dealing with, whether it's on a will, whether it's on buying a house. Make that person be responsible to you. Make that person respond to your needs and what your legal problems are, no matter how much of a hurry that person may be in. I guess that I'm still there because out of the 60s also was a phrase, if you're not a part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And as a prosecutor, I think that I am a part of the solution. 6 years before becoming a prosecutor, I was a defense attorney. Usually it goes the other way around. You're a prosecutor, you learn all your trial skills, and then you go out and become a defense attorney and charge $500 an hour or $1,000 an hour and make all the money that you can make. But I did it, again, backwards, and I enjoy what I'm doing, and I do believe that it is a service and it is a public service. The unfortunate thing about my job is that prosecution represents the failure of our institutions. By the time that I see people who have been investigated, the information's been presented to a grand jury, because in the federal system, you cannot charge a person with a felony without presenting that information to a grand jury. It's not like the state system where you can go down and say, I had a fight with Ben Robinson and I want to swear out a complaint against him. The federal system, the Fifth Amendment guarantees everyone the right that if you're going to be charged with a felony, which means a sentence of more than 1 year in prison, the government has to present that case to a federal grand jury unless you waive that right. So by the time I see these individuals, the family structure, if there was one, has failed. The religious institution has failed. The educational institution has failed. And that individual now stands before the court charged with a crime. But before he stands before the court, it is my responsibility to determine whether or not that person should be charged and how that person is charged. And again, I believe that that's a very serious responsibility, and I take it seriously. And it is an agonizing responsibility. I look at each case that I charge, and I think about the impact that these criminal charges are going to have on that person, on their family, on their extended family, what's going to happen to them when they get out. And I look at the evidence, I look at the gravity of the crime, and I come to a conclusion that they are going to be charged. And one of my favorite phrases is, they got to go. They got to go. And in Fort Wayne right now, we have a lot of people who are robbing banks. And they're robbing banks with guns, going in, it's like the movies. The gun turned sideways, all the profanities, telling everybody to get down on the floor, jumping over the counter, taking money and stuff like that. We've had situations where the gun has gone off in the bank. I believe that someone, an innocent teller or person in the bank, is going to get killed. In the federal system, if you rob, if you use or carry a gun during and in relationship to a crime of violence or a drug trafficking offense, you get a mandatory 5 years, no parole, no probation, in addition to whatever you get for the drug charge or the crime of violence. And in bank robberies, the phrase is, we don't eat the gun. We don't deal away the gun, you got to go. The gun, you're going to have to either go to trial or plead to the gun count and take the 5 years. Because I firmly believe that someone's going to be hurt. And when the evidence supports a decision like that, that is the decision that has to be made. I was telling Greg, I got a case right now, a young lady is 19 years old, bank robbery case. She's 19. She's got a child 18 months old, and she's pregnant by one of the bank robbers. There were 3 bank robbers, and one was her boyfriend. He's 29 years old. He has 9 children, and he's married. And she didn't want to testify against her man. And you look at this child, because they are a child, and you say, you don't know what you're involved in. And I look at that person and I say, how can I salvage this person? Is that person salvageable? Because as an aider and abetter, and they robbed the place with the guns, you get stuck with the guns, so she's looking at 5 years. They injured a person in the bank robbery, so you got aggravating circumstances, and they'll probably pick up another 8 to 10 years for the bank robbery itself, and they're looking at 15 years. And in the federal system, you will do 85% of that time. Unlike the state system in Indiana, where you get a day off for each day that you serve, in the federal system, it's called good time. You only get good time after the first year. And after the first year, you have to do approximately 85% of that sentence. And I look at this young woman and I say, that's too much time. This person is 19 years old. She is stupid for doing this. Can I do anything to salvage this person? And what I've done is I've charged her with the statute. And what she did was she took them there. They got out, robbed the bank. She didn't pick them up. She went back to her apartment, and they were all staying in her apartment. And when she came back, they gave her $500. And there's a statute that prohibits you from receiving funds that you know to be stolen from a financial institution. So I charged her with that statute and with the aiding and abetting statute. But I'm prepared to deal away the aiding and abetting statute, which would give her 12 years in prison. But in exchange, she's going to have to testify against, the phrase is, her daddy's baby. She got to do it. And part of the reason for that is I want her to make a break with those people in the criminal element that she's been associating with. And if she has to get up on the stand in front of everybody and be a snitch, so to speak, hopefully none of the criminal element will accept her back into the fold, and it will be more difficult for her to get involved in criminal activity. She can then plead to the charge of accepting $500 of money that was stolen, which is a misdemeanor charge, which means the sentence will be less than 1 year, and probably based on the amount that's involved, she'll end up with probation, which is a good thing. because we have an excellent probation department, and they will put her on probation, or the court could put her on probation for 3 years. She'd have to report every week or every day. She'd have to find a job. She'd have to get back in school, and she'll have to be responsible. And I see that as a service to the community and a service to that particular individual. So unlike what you see on television and also in real life, where you see prosecutors who love to portray themselves as hard and, pardon the phrase, kick-ass prosecutors that lock up and prosecute anybody and everybody, I just idealistically would hope that those people would be weeded out of the system, and that people who are prosecutors would do the job that they're supposed to do, and that is prosecute each case based on the facts and circumstances of that case regarding the crime, and also prosecute that person or look at that person as an individual and always think, is this person salvageable? What can I do to divert this person from this crime? I have a woman she's been a dope dealer for years and years and years. She ended up getting 295 months in prison due to some Supreme Court changes. That sentence has been reduced, and she testified against her boyfriend, who's now looking at life in prison for dealing drugs. But she's a sad case. She's 50 years old. She's never had a job. She's always been a player, always been a player. Now she's too old to be a player. And you know what? She is our responsibility. Because as one of the guys I prosecuted said to me, you know, Dave, I'm going to get out someday. I'm going to be out someday. And we have to, as a society, determine what are we going to do with that person. Right now, the current vogue is to warehouse them, build more jails, lock them up, throw away the key. The problem is they're going to get out. They're not going to stay in there forever. And the other problem is when we have 3 strikes and you're out and it's a life sentence, etc. Now we're getting an older jail population. They have prostate cancer. They have heart disease. They have lung problems. They have tremendous medical problems. Who pays for it? We pay for it. We pay for keeping them there, warehousing them, and now we got to pay for their medical illnesses for the rest of their lives. And so we have to, as a society, think about how we can salvage people, and instead of warehousing people, and instead of building bigger and better jails, figure out how we can take that money and maybe put it on the front end and divert people out of the criminal justice system. I know to some people who are prosecutors probably think that this is heresy for me to get up and say this because it sounds like you're a defense attorney. I don't think that at all. I think it is the reality of the situation. And society is going to have to deal with it whether they want to or not, and we are blindly paying for bigger and bigger jails and not doing anything about the problem. And that's why I say by the time they get to me, all these other institutions have failed. And it's now my responsibility to deal with that person. And the only thing that I can say is when people say, well, what are you going to do about it? And I have no answer. The only thing I can say for that person that has committed a crime that is so serious that they need to be locked up, the only thing that I can say is for that period of time, they will not be dealing drugs on this corner. That's all I can tell you. We still have to address that individual and what we're going to do when they get out. When I left Ball State, I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do in life. To paraphrase Senator Dole, when you don't know where you're going, every road will take you there. And I took a lot of those roads. Because I didn't go to law school right out of Ball State. I did a lot of different things. I was in the Army. I worked in the poverty program. I worked for the Urban League. I did a lot of things. I was almost 30 years old when I went to law school. But fortunately for me, I found direction and purpose in my life when I met and married my wife, LaVon, and when I was accepted and admitted into the University of Michigan Law School. Those are the two best things that have happened to me in my life. And they're very important to me. And I've said it, and I will always say that, because they are important. And for all of the, now his name escapes me, the guy from California that's against affirmative action, what's his name, Ben? Ward Connolly. I am here as an example of what Ward Connolly does not want to see. When I left Ball State, I had a 2.5 GPA. And at that period of time, if you graduated, period, you thought that you were an A student. Or if you had a 2 point, you thought that you were an A student, because everybody was trying to meet the bare minimum just to stay until the next semester. And so when you graduated, if you had a 2 point, you were on fire. And if you had a 2.5, you were on your way. And I graduated from Ball State with a 2.5 GPA. I took the law school aptitude test. I was 29, I think, at the time. It was in 1970. There was a big strike at the University of Michigan about admitting more minorities into the law school. And they capitulated. The law school and the medical school, they had an admissions committee. So I had to write a paper, had to go up and tell them why I wanted to be a lawyer. At that time, I was working in the poverty program, and I thought, when I got out, I would be a poverty lawyer. I'd go back to the poverty program, be a lawyer, and do rent cases and do class action cases against welfare offices and stuff like that. But my life did not turn out that way. After the interview, they asked me, did I have any questions? And I said, I only have one question. When are you going to let me know whether I can come to school here or not? And the thing was, I wasn't going anywhere. So it didn't matter whether I got in or I didn't get in. So it seems kind of brash as I look at it now, but I had nothing to lose, and it was like, how much more time are you going to take for me? You going to tell me whether I'm in or not? And they let me in. And I successfully completed the University of Michigan Law School, which is, I think it's better than Harvard, but it's one of the top law schools in the country. And I passed the bar. And from that experience, I believe that my children have benefited from that affirmative action. My children, my daughter's a lawyer. My son's graduated from Indiana University School of Business. He's getting an MBA. Based on all the objective facts, I was not supposed to be able to get into the University of Michigan because you had to have at least a 3.5, which is a B+, just to apply, and you had to score something like, at that time, 700 on the LSAT scores, which was 800 was the top. And at the time that I applied, there were 400 seats and 4,000 people applied for those 400 seats. And fortunately, I was admitted. I survived. I passed the bar. I got married after my first year. I went to law school single. I left with a wife and 2 children. So when it came time to pass the bar and get your license, there was no question about what I had to do. I had to take care of those people. I had to feed those people, and I could not do that if I did not pass the bar. So affirmative action should not die. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of people just like me who have been successful, and there's thousands and thousands and thousands of other students who, on the surface, it appears that they will not be successful, or my test scores can't be successful, and they have a lot to contribute to society. So I was admitted to the University of Michigan through this affirmative action program. Prior to that time, my wife characterized me as being a lost ball in high weeds. I was just rolling around out there with no place to go. And that's why I say being married to her and getting into law school was the best thing that ever happened to me. I've survived the ups and downs of life, the bitter disappointments of racial discrimination and bigotry in my personal and professional life, and have grown up and bounced back and gone forward along with all of those attending this alumni reunion and every reunion like this across the country. We're all survivors. We survived either because of or in spite of Ball State. We survived. and we've succeeded, and we are here today. And as I mentioned earlier, not everyone has survived. 95% of my world consists of the 5% of the people who are committing crimes. I prosecute violations of federal law, bank robberies, tax evaders, perpetrators of wire fraud, mail fraud, now internet fraud, and the majority of my cases, as I mentioned before, for the last 15 years have been in major drug dealers from, you wouldn't think this, but from California, Texas, Miami, Florida. They're coming into Indiana, and particularly in the northern district of Indiana. We have a large influx of drugs from some of the source cities. One of the consistent factors that I have observed as a prosecutor is that 99% of the crime that is committed is because of greed and not need. And you know, people come in, I needed to pay rent, I needed to do this. There are tremendous programs out there to help people if they'll take advantage of them. But most of the people I see have committed the crime because of greed and not need. They also have no appreciation for the concept of delayed gratification, only instant gratification. A lot of them have no strong family support or a commitment to the concept of family. There's no positive support system to teach or reinforce the traditional values of right and wrong. And one of the most glaring things is that there's a lack of formal education, but there's not a lack of intelligence. And as I've said on many occasions, if a person can convert those pounds of cocaine to kilograms of cocaine or ounces of cocaine to grams of cocaine and work that metric system and figure out that profit margin that they have to make to pay their supplier and make a profit, they are not stupid people. They may be uneducated, but they are not stupid people. And that tells me that our educational system needs to take a hard look at what it's doing. And along with that, if they can quote all the lyrics to Ice-T, they can quote the lyrics to Shakespeare. It's just a matter of motivation. And again, we have to find that way. And I'm searching along with everyone else in an attempt to find a way to salvage and divert people and utilize the intelligence in a positive way that those individuals have. And I speak from experience in a sense because I came that close to going to prison myself when I was 17 or 18 years old. And a lot of times you never know what it is that's going to turn an individual around. One of the things is, and it's exemplified by this meeting and this gathering and the opening remarks, and that is an affirmation of the traditional black values. How did we evade the lure of the streets? When you reflect on it, as I've done, you will recall a moment, a point, where you decided, I don't want that life. I don't want to do that anymore. That's where we have to bring the people that I see. They have to come to a realization, I don't want to do that, and there's something better for me than what I'm doing. And all the talk about glamour, about how much money they can make, and they can't flip hamburgers, and they can't take some menial job because they can make all that money. Let me tell you, the people that I see aren't making all that money. They're looking over their shoulder, they're getting shot, they're not living fat, they're living hard. And it's not an easy life, and it's not a glamorous life. There are people that too often the system does not investigate, and those are the people that are financing the drug trafficking. We end up with most of the people that I call cannon fodder. These are people that are expendable in that system, and they get caught, and they get chewed up, and they get these sentences. But there are people who are financing drug trafficking, and they are the much more difficult individuals to prosecute, and it takes more effort and time for law enforcement to do that. As I said, you made a decision that you did not want to live that life. I made that decision, and I internalized and accepted the traditions and values that have been the mainstay of the African American community since we came here as slaves. I read a column when it appears in a Fort Wayne paper by Bill Maxwell, who's a columnist for the St. Petersburg Times. And he stated in a recent article, "We as African Americans have a great legacy of dignity, decency, self-reliance, and community sharing that gave our forebears their abilities to survive more than 2 centuries of enslavement, human degradation, and violence. And we need to continue to reinforce those values in our community." We also had a firm and very strong belief in education as a means of improving our conditions and our lives. And there was always that expectation by some aunt, uncle, relative, mother, or father that you must go further than I did. It is expected and it is required. Set high expectations. And I'm sure that everyone in this room has had that experience. That's why you're here. That's why you're an alumni. That's why you have been successful. You had high expectations of yourself. And even though I was a lost ball in the high weeds, I remember the admonition of my father, who told me, "You can never get too much education, even though you may not see the immediate value of that education." And that's what I did. I just kind of stumbled into what I'm doing now through a series of choices. As I said, I never thought about going to law school when I was at Ball State, and I never thought about going to law school after I left Ball State. I was almost 30 years old when the idea first came to me. So unlike Brother Ben Robinson and my daughter Leslie, who knew early on that they wanted to become lawyers, as I said, I kind of stumbled into laws from a pursuit of education. We must keep these values constantly in the foreground in our community. And often when faced with frustrating situations of racial injustice, social slights, or outright discrimination, we must keep the expectation of our forefathers in focus and remind ourselves, as a friend of mine has told me on occasion when I was having a bad day or feeling particularly frustrated, he would say, "Dave, this isn't hard. Slavery was hard. This is not hard. You can do this." And it helps me stay focused. It helps me to get right my compass and keep on the track that I am on. And he's absolutely right. When you hear people talking about I couldn't get my Air Jordans, or I couldn't get this, or I couldn't get this groove on because of this, that ain't hard. Slavery was hard. That's hard. Amistad was hard. Not having Air Jordans ain't hard. Not getting on the basketball team, that ain't hard. Slavery was hard. And we must continue to remind our young people, because some of us have lived long enough, as I've recounted some of my experiences here and experiences in the past, my children don't recall those types of situations. And it's important for us to remind them that they do have a legacy, they do have a tradition, and it is expected of them that they live up to that expectation and that tradition. Finally, I would like to share with you some principles of survival. When my children became teenagers and began to experience more responsibility and freedom from parental control, and I knew I couldn't be with them every moment, I came up with these 5 principles to guide them through life, and particularly through the teenage years. And I want to share them with you. Some of you may have grandchildren or children that are coming into their teenage years, and perhaps they may be helpful for you. The first one is never, ever, ever lose your self-respect. Never do anything that you won't respect yourself in the morning. I don't care what the situation is. I don't care how novel or new. I don't care how good it may sound. If you stop and think, how am I going to feel about myself in the morning? That may just be the thing that stops you from making a foolish mistake. I read an article by Elijah Gossier, who is another columnist, that discussed self-respect when he was writing about the Million Man March. And he said, and I quote, "Self-respect is not wealth or position or fame. Self-respect does not mean ostentation or acquiring assets others don't have. Self-respect has nothing to do with other people. It's about your self-respect. Self-respect has to do with strength and determination and conviction and providing for your family, self-sufficiency, but giving help to others when it's needed, not with the expectation of getting something in return, but because you can help. Standing up for what you think is right, even if it's unpopular." And I thought those were very powerful words, and I wanted to share them under this first category of self-respect. The second thing that I told my children was have personal integrity. And we're living in an era now that all you got to do is be packaged. Put on the right package and look like you know what you're doing and say anything to get to the next level. We must keep in mind that your integrity is not for sale. It has no price, and it should never have a price. Make your word mean something. Don't give it unless you mean to keep it. Strive for financial independence. And this means you must control debt and save for that rainy day. And it's hard for us, as along with young people, to ever think there's going to be a rainy day when things are going good. But for those of you who have lived long enough, there's always going to be a rainy day. And as your grandmother or your auntie told you, you need a little something back, honey, for that rainy day, because it is coming. Develop a spiritual base. With age and experience comes a recognition that there are some situations that are beyond your control. That those impact on your lives during these uncertain times, you need a spiritual base as your compass. And finally, you must have discipline in your life. In order for anything to work, you have to have discipline, and you have to strive for discipline to make you do the right things and get up and do the things that are necessary to be done. I want to thank you again. I want to thank Ball State Black Alumni Association, Brother Robinson, for asking me to speak here today. It is through alumni associations such as this that we can perpetuate traditional African American values and the importance of education. And I will leave with you finally food for thought from a minister who married LaVon and I 27 years ago, and who also married my mother and father years ago, Reverend James Crawley. And he said, and I don't know if this is original or not, but I wrote it down and I often think about it. We sow our thoughts and reap our acts. We sow our acts and reap our habits. We sow our habits and reap our character. And we sow our character and reap our destiny. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Linda Wilson, and joining me this evening is John Hall. And we are at this point in our program going to make 4 presentations for the Outstanding Black Alumni Awards for this particular reunion. The first person that we are going to recognize tonight is Dr. Francesca Mukes Armour. Dr. Armour is a 1973 graduate of Ball State in nursing. She received in 1992 the Outstanding Nursing Alumni Award for Education from Ball State's Nursing Alumni Association. She received her master's degree in 1976 from the University of Evansville. and a doctorate in 1989 from Indiana State University. She has been a professor at Bradley University since 1990. And at Bradley University, she serves at the graduate level as coordinator for the Department of Nursing. From 1974 through 1990, Dr. Armour served as professor and departmental chair of nursing at Vincennes University. Dr. Armour is also a member of the board of directors of the Peoria Urban League, an officer of the Delta Sigma Theta Public Service Sorority, and assistant Sunday school superintendent at the Zion Baptist Church in Peoria, Illinois. It is my pleasure and an honor that I present the Ball State Alumni Association Outstanding Black Alumni Award to Dr. Francesca Mukes Armour. Dr. Armour, if you'll come forward. I'd like to read the plaque. Ball State University, in recognition of outstanding professional achievement, exceptional service, exemplary representation of an alma mater, Francesca A. Armour is hereby recognized as an outstanding Black alumni of Ball State University, July 18, 1989. Thank you. 98, I'm sorry. Okay, can we hold the plaque? Yeah, okay. Gotta do a little PR here. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
To the Executive Committee of the Black Alumni Constituent Society, I am very honored and I am grateful to God who ordered my steps in such a way that I was to be blessed by attending Ball State University. Not only did I receive an excellent education in nursing at Ball State because the faculty are known and they are excellent, but I have to pause just for a moment to say thank you to a person who served as my advisor. At the time, his name was Mr. Greenwood. I know he is now Dr. Greenwood. He took a chance with me because there was a time in the College of Nursing when they believed that I wouldn't be successful in nursing, and he refused to let me quit. He showed me by precept and by example that it is risky to care for students, but it's worth it. And because I was at Ball State, I was able to meet individuals that I have known and have grown to respect and to admire and to love. Individuals who have seen me through some pretty rough times and who have been there to share some very high moments. I'm reminded of a poet who wrote, "Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler long I've stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth." And he goes on and later closes by saying, "I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere, ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in the wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference." I thank the Constituent Society. I thank Ball State for making a difference in my life. Thank you.
Ball State colleagues, if I say to you, those who were here with Bob Cody, that I knew Luther before Luther knew who he was, you know what I'm talking about, don't you? Robert M. Cody is a man of many talents, and his voice just happens to be one. Our second recipient of the Ball State University's Outstanding Black Alumni Award is Mr. Robert M. Cody. Cody was Director of Minority Student Services. He is presently the Director of Minority Student Services at Florida International University. He's been there since 1993. He received his bachelor's degree in physical education in 1968 and a master's degree in counseling in 1972, both from Ball State University. Mr. Cody is a member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. He also serves as he served minority students at Ball State University for over 15 years. First in the Office of Special Programs, and then as the interim vice president for student development. He then went to the University of Louisville for 3 years, where he was director of the Center for Academic Achievement. While at the Florida International University, he has developed the Florida International's Retention Service Program. This program resulted in retention of minority students going from 65% to a 79% retention rate from 1984 to 1991. For this, Mr. Cody received the 1991 Retention and Excellence Award from Noel Levitt's National Center for Student Retention. He participates in many civic and university organizations which focus on youth training, student retention, and funding for minority student development. In 1992, he was named African American Achiever by the Louisville Defender. He has been cited in several publications, as well as authoring and co-authoring articles. Mr. Cody has been active with the Louisville Urban League, Parent Advisory Committee of the YMCA, Black Achievers, NAACP, both in Louisville and Muncie chapters, and the Muncie Human Rights Commission. He is also a very good mentor and friend. I present to you our second recipient, Mr. Robert M. Cody.
Thank you.
Isn't it strange? Isn't it strange that princes and kings and clowns that caper in sawdust rings and common people like you and me are builders for eternity? Each is given a bag of tools, a shapeless mass, and a book of rules. And each must make ere life is flown a stumbling block or a stepping stone. I'd like to acknowledge Board of Trustee member Penny Thomas, to Don Park, Vice President of Advancement, Ed Shipley, Executive Director of the Alumni Affairs, to Alan Williams, the President of the Alumni Council, to Fred Cox, the President of the greatest constituency and Alumni Society that Ball State has, to the co-chairs of the Alumni Reunion, Janelle Joyner and Connie Winfrey. Ball State alums and friends, I consider your recognition of me an honor, a high honor, and I thank you for suggesting to me that I might in fact be a stepping stone. And I want you to know that upon my return to Miami, that if asked if anything good can come out of Ball State University and Muncie, Indiana, I will offer myself and this award as proof. I too must give thanks to the Creator who predetermined and preordained my place and space in time. I am quite thankful for having loving and supportive parents who never allowed me to argue for my limitations, but sought ways to help me rise above them. They were parents who let me know in words, deeds, and action that being a man or a woman is a matter of birth, but being a man or woman who makes a difference is a matter of choice. And I'm very thankful that even though they're not here today to see your recognition of me, their son, I want you to acknowledge them and let you know that I stand on their shoulders. They were my props, long before props were known to be popular. I think people like Robert Foster and Jim Marine, folk who hired me, who took a chance on me at Ball State University. They hired, they supervised, and mentored me. And they taught me many, many valuable lessons in the administration of higher education. Dr. Charles Greenwood, who was never really my advisor, but oh, he demonstrated his care and concern as a role model. And he did something that I still try to do today as I work with college students. He found the time, he made the time, and took the time to work me in between his multiple appointments. And I feel some gratitude and some indebtedness to him for that. And he was just doing his job and being dedicated. To the educator supreme who's not here this year with us, Dr. Mylan Brown, who is a mentor and a friend and who continues to stay in touch with me. As a matter of fact, he called me earlier this week, late at night, trying to fool me as to who he was, but he does that, just kind of like checking on me, and it's very much appreciated. To the late Dr. Harvey Thomas, who took time and took special interest in me here in the Muncie community during my student days at BSU. It was valuable, and it was needed. To Dean Howard, who helped me to keep my focus as not only a student, but as a Ball State University football player. Dean, thank you, and you know from which I speak. Thank you. To all of my brothers and sisters, many of which who had much more talent than I had, but fewer opportunities, because in the 50s, and even in the 60s, the 50s really and the 60s often were not kind to people of color, not only in Muncie and Indiana, but throughout the Midwest. My sister Muriel Whedon, would you stand, is here with us. She is an alumni today, and she stands and she represents my family, others of which are still living here in Muncie. To Sue Detmer, who is back with the alumni office, and I say this because for many of you, you may not know it, but I think I had over 300, maybe 400 names that I had collected. And Sue, in an earlier tenure in working at Alumni, worked with me and received the list and began to look at it and do further research. And I think before she left, we may have been on the way to about 700 names of alumni and folk that had passed this way. And I say thanks to Sue, and I'm glad to see that you're back. And I can't thank everyone, but I'm trying to move very quickly for your benefit as well as mine. I want to say to my son, Robert, who is not here, but my daughter, Dion, who is, who shared their spare moments growing up at Ball State University and the University of Louisville campuses. Dion, would you stand? Some of you remember her when she was this tall. That's my daughter, and there were times when I couldn't be at her, at the parent meetings, excuse me, and I didn't see all of her track meets, and I didn't see all the times that she led cheers, but she knows that I was on the case working for students. And certainly not least to my very best friend for the past 34 years, my wife, Berdine Golden Cody. Berdine, would you stand? Berdine, before, during, and after each setback, every setup, and any comeback that I have made, Berdine was there. Berdine has stood beside me and never complained when I went the extra mile for students. So Ball State Alumni and Ball State Black Alumni Society, thank you for acknowledging my accomplishments and considering a common person like me a stepping stone. I encourage you to remember that a third-rate mind is happy when thinking with the majority, and that a second-rate mind is happy when thinking with the minority. And a first-rate mind is only happy when it is thinking. I'll be thinking of you. Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
I think that we should, for our third recipient, who is David Miller, let us give him a hand for that thoughtful and insightful speech that he gave us a little earlier. But I want to say to you, David, now, if the Bird was tougher than the Debonair Club, you know, many of you are too young to know about the Debonair Club, you know. I don't think it was, but we'll let that go. You've heard Ben give the introduction to Mr. Miller, and you heard those pieces, but I just want to say that in my few past jobs and past careers, traveling around the state of Indiana, it was very interesting to come up on David Miller. Ed Shipley was sitting at the table and he said, well, John, did you ever pledge a fraternity? And so I didn't give him the fact that, you know, well, maybe my grades wasn't that good, you know, or that my family member, you know, I had friends that were in both major fraternities that were like family members, so I didn't give him that. But the real reason was sitting in the tally. I probably was studying. I think that's what I was doing. But we were in the tally, and there's some Kappas there introduced me to this guy that they call Dr. Death. I knew then I didn't want anything to do with. But I just want to briefly, we heard that introduction, but as I travel around the state of Indiana, I just wanted to say about David Miller, he is so well respected on both sides of the aisle for his intelligence, for his integrity, and I just want to say that to you. And you know, it was amazing how I know you didn't know me from, you know, being here. I was such a young guy. But to hear your name, to know that you were a part of Ball State, made me so proud. But I just want to reiterate that with his record that Ben gave you, that David Miller also has been admitted to practice with the Supreme Court of Indiana, the U.S. Tax Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court. He has received the Richard G. Lugar Outstanding Federal Employee Award. That's my former boss. I want you to know that. The Zeta Phi Beta Mark of Excellence in the Field of Law, National Association of Negro Business and Professional Women's Service Award, and the Department of Justice Outstanding Performance Award. Let us please receive our third recipient, David Miller, as our Outstanding Black Alumni for 1998.
Thank you. I won't take up any more time. I spoke, my wife was giving me the cut it off signal, but sometimes lawyers get mesmerized by the sound of their own voice. But I do want to thank the Black Alumni Constituent Society. I am humbled and I am honored to receive this award, and I do receive it on behalf of all the C students who graduated from Ball State.
The final award that we are going to present goes to Mr. Tim Brown, a 1996 graduate from Ball State University. He's unable to be with us due to a prior commitment, but we have asked Mr. Ben Robinson to accept the award for him. Mr. Tim Brown, who received his degree in physical education in 1996, is currently Deputy Probation Officer for the Los Angeles County Probation Department. While at Ball State University, Mr. Brown played both basketball and football. He was an All-American both in his junior and senior year. He was drafted by the NFL and played 10 years, primarily with the Philadelphia Eagles. He was named to the All-Pro honors 3 times. He played in the 1960 NFL World Championship and Super Bowl III. After a very outstanding career in football, he retired, moving to Los Angeles, and began an acting career, which he continues today. Some of the credits include the movie MASH and some of the subsequent episodes of the TV spinoff of MASH. He has appeared in numerous television shows and made 15 movies. He's made music videos, provided documentary, on-air interviews, and continues to lend his support to numerous community activities within the Los Angeles area. In 1987, he was selected Volunteer of the Year by the LA County Probation Department. At this time, we'd like to give a round of applause for Tim Brown, and Ben Robinson will accept that award in his absence.
On behalf of Tim, I'm sure that he is honored by this. I spoke to Tim prior to this particular evening, and he expressed his deep appreciation for this award. He is very honored. He's sorry that he was not able to come, but he does thank you and thank all of us. Thank you very much on behalf of Tim.
If we can give a round of applause for all of our 4 nominees and award winners.
Anybody know what time it is? Party time. Okay, these are the closing remarks. If you bear with me for 2 things. This reunion, I'm glad to see a lot of people here in the room, because last Sunday, I was literally pulling my hair out. And Monday and Tuesday, I was on the phone with several people here, and we're trying to make sure that, we were hoping to make sure that we had a lot of people in the room, and I'm glad to see that the room is filled up. So what we've done, we put together a video of some of the reunions. I shouldn't say we, I guess I should say me. And I hope that you enjoy that. Just to take a few minutes to look at that, and then one thing afterwards, and I think we'll all be fairly happy. So we can dim the lights and we'll hit play. And for those of you who are first-timers, this is what you missed. And for those of you who have been here before, this is what you may want to forget. Okay. Believe it or not, there's a lot of footage on the cutting room floor. And there's some other incriminating evidence, too. I see some smiles in the audience. Let me get my crib notes out. I forgot about that. Several things got to do. First of all, let me say thanks to all the board members for helping pull this reunion together. Congratulations to all the outstanding Black alumni who received awards this evening. I think it's significant that we gave awards out to people who are in education, the legal field, medical and healthcare, and then professional athletics. And that shows areas that we've exceeded in. Thanks to Ed, Pam, Russ, Melissa, Susan, people who've worked with me in the past. I'm saying this because this is my swan song. You saw that the gentleman at the end of the video is now the new president-elect of the Ball State Black Alumni Constituent Society. It's been 6 years, it's been wonderful, and I really enjoyed it. I feel basically like Bill Clinton, no matter what happens from this point forward, I won't be president. Okay? All right. Okay, one quick point on housekeeping, kind of to say some things. We do have a room that is dedicated from the Black alumni who donated $100,000 with the efforts of one of the board members, and that room is right here next to us. As a matter of fact, those that were at the seminars earlier today, that was the room that we're sharing with another group, but that room will be dedicated in honor of Black alumni here at Ball State, and that's significant. And finally, I didn't want to leave this prestigious organization, as Mr. Cody has said, without trying to establish some other things. And so tonight, for the very first time, we're going to give away the President's Award from the Black Alumni Constituent Society, and it's going to go to a board member who has done some outstanding things. So without further ado, let me get this out. And if you would join me, y'all, and I'm going to read this. It says, Ball State University Black Alumni Constituent Society President's Award is presented to the BACS board member who has gone beyond the call of volunteerism and charity on behalf of Black alumni and Ball State University. Would you please join me? And we're going to honor Mr. Benjamin Robinson. Now, Ben had asked for some final words. He didn't know this was going to happen, and the board is in complete agreement with that. So Ben has some final words.
First of all, to Fred and the members who thought to give me this award, I'm surprised, and I appreciate it. It wasn't done